Hello, dear listeners. Tonight, I am taking you to an era when even being a child was difficult. Growing up in the Middle Ages was not a game. It was a test. The moment you took your first step, you were confronted with disease, cold, and hunger. What about you? If you were a child in those dark centuries, could you have survived? If you find yourself walking those stone streets in the middle of this story, please share when and where you heard it in the comments. It would truly make me happy. Liking this video and subscribing to the channel is also invaluable for us to continue this journey. Now, dim the lights. Slow your breath. Close your eyes and gently drift back to that distant time. The world awakens not with a gentle hum or the distant glow of city lights, but with the sharp, insistent crow of a rooster, a sound that pierces the pre-dawn stillness like a rusty blade. It is a raw, insistent call, announcing the arrival of another day, demanding attention from the huddled forms within the small, smoky hut. You are not a traveler from another time here, not a detached observer. You are part of this world now, small and vulnerable, existing in the rough-hewn reality of a medieval peasant's home. Your body, accustomed to the soft comforts of a forgotten future, now feels the biting chill of the mud floor through thin, threadbare straw and the unyielding hardness of the earth beneath your crude palate. The air in the hut is thick, a heavy mixture of wood smoke from the smoldering hearth, the earthy scent of straw, and the faint, ever-present odor of damp soil and unwashed bodies. It clings to your throat, a familiar, slightly irritating presence that you no longer consciously notice. Through the small, unglazed opening that serves as a window, you can just discern the first, hesitant blush of dawn painting the eastern sky, a bruised purple slowly giving way to a muted, melancholic gray. Outside, the world is still, save for the occasional restless rustle of a tethered goat or the low murmur of a disturbed hen. Beside you, the figures of your family stir. Your mother, a silhouette against the dying embers of the fire, begins to cough, a dry, persistent sound that echoes in the confined space. Your father, a large, calloused hand resting on your arm, lets out a deep, rumbling sigh as he slowly pushes himself upright. The creak of old bones, the rustle of coarse wool, the soft shuffle of bare feet on dirt, these are the sounds of your daily awakening, a symphony of quiet struggle. There are no alarm clocks here, no soft mattresses, no hot drinks waiting. Only the relentless rhythm of the sun, the needs of the animals, and the eternal demands of the land. You push yourself up, your small limbs still heavy with sleep, your muscles stiff from the cold and the hard ground. Your bare feet, already accustomed to the rough earth, slide into worn wooden clogs, your only footwear. The rough-spun tunic, your only clothing, feels scratchy against your skin. There are no choices here, no fashion, no comfort for comfort's sake, only function and survival. Your hair, uncombed and coarse, falls into your eyes, and you brush it away with a hand already rough with small nicks and calluses. Your first task, as almost always, is to help tend the fire. You crawl towards the hearth, the warmth a welcome, if fleeting, comfort against the morning chill. With small, practiced hands, you carefully nudge the smoldering logs, adding a few dried branches and handfuls of straw. The smoke billows momentarily, stinging your eyes, but soon tiny flames begin to dance, licking at the kindling, growing stronger. The orange glow spreads, casting dancing shadows on the mud and wattle walls, bringing a little life to the dim interior. This is a vital task. Fire means warmth, cooked food, and safety from the unseen creatures of the night. It is a responsibility you've known since you were barely able to walk. As the fire grows, your mother begins to prepare the morning meal. There is no elaborate breakfast. From a rough wooden shelf, she takes a small bag of coarsely ground grain. Water, fetched from the well yesterday evening and stored in a clay pot, is poured into a metal cauldron hanging over the flames. Grain is added, slowly, stirring constantly with a wooden spoon until it thickens into a watery, bland gruel. The smell is plain, earthy, but reassuringly familiar. This is the fuel for your day, for the endless toil that awaits. Your younger siblings, still bundled together for warmth in a corner, begin to stir. A baby's soft cry, quickly soothed by your mother's gentle hum. A younger sister, perhaps 5, years old, rubs the sleep from her eyes, her face smudged with dirt. You offer her a small, chipped wooden bowl of the warm gruel, careful not to spill a drop. There are no toys here, no stories before meals, no leisure. Only the quiet, shared act of sustenance, eaten quickly, efficiently, before the day truly begins. Outside, the first rays of the sun begin to penetrate the morning mist, painting the fields in shades of dull green and brown. The air is still cold, but the sharp bite is easing. You hear the distant bray of a donkey, the bleating of sheep being led out to pasture. The village is waking, slowly, communally. Smoke plumes begin to rise from other thatched roofs, thin fingers reaching towards the pale sky, each one a testament to another family beginning their day of labor. Your father is already out, checking on the meager plot of land surrounding your hut, or perhaps tending to the single scrawny cow that is your family's most valuable possession. Your tasks, the day are clear, laid out long before the sun rises. There is no question of what you will do, no choice. It is the same as yesterday, and the day before that, and as it will be tomorrow. For you, as a child of 7 or 8 summers, the day means work. There is no formal education here, no schools, no books beyond the priest's Latin missal, which you can neither read nor comprehend. Learning comes from doing, from watching, from endless repetition. You will learn to sift grain, to gather firewood, to tend to the smaller animals, to help with the spinning of wool, to prepare simple meals. Your hands are your tools, your body your instrument. You step out of the hut, the cold morning air a sharp shock against your face, but you ignore it. The mud squelches beneath your clogs as you walk towards the small, enclosed pen where the hens scratch. Your first job is to collect the eggs, a simple yet vital task. Each egg is precious, a source of protein for your family, or a commodity, to be bartered in the village market for something equally essential. Your small fingers carefully feel through the straw, searching for the warm, smooth oval shape's dot as you collect the eggs. You watch the sun slowly climb higher, bathing this village in its cool, indifferent light. You see other children, not playing, but already at work. A boy, no older than yourself, leads a stubborn donkey laden with firewood. A girl, with a younger sibling strapped to her back, fetches water from the communal well, the heavy bucket, testing her small frame. There is no childhood innocence as you understand it, no prolonged period of play and carefree exploration. Childhood here is a brief prelude to labor, a swift transition from infancy to responsibility. The games you play are fleeting moments stolen from chores, improvisations with sticks and stones or quiet, imaginative narratives whispered in the brief moments of respite. You finish collecting the eggs, carrying the small basket carefully, back to the hut. Your mind is not on dreams or fantastical stories, but on the next task, the next obligation. The day stretches long before you, filled with the promise of endless toil, broken only by the brief, bland meals and the hope of a warm, if smoky, hearth at night. This is your life. This is your childhood. A childhood shaped not by toys or lessons, but by the relentless rhythm of the seasons, the harsh demands of the land, and the constant, unspoken understanding that your survival, and the survival of your family, depends on every small hand, every willing back. The weight of this responsibility, though carried unknowingly, is heavier than any load you will ever lift. The sun, now fully risen, casts a pale, indifferent light across the small village, highlighting the rough textures of thatched roofs and mud walls, making the morning mist shimmer above the fields. The initial chill of dawn has given way to a sharper cold, typical of a medieval day, that promises little warmth until high noon. For you, the child of the land, the rhythm of the day has already taken hold, an invisible current pulling you from one chore to the next. The eggs collected, the fire stoked, the meager gruel consumed, these are merely the prelude to the ceaseless demands of survival. Your next task is often with the animals, creatures whose lives are intertwined with your own, their well-being, directly linked to your family's sustenance. Perhaps you lead the family's scrawny goat to a small patch of sparse grass beyond the village fence, its bleating a familiar accompaniment to your quiet steps, your small hands already calloused. Despite your youth, grasp the rough rope tethering the animal, feeling the tug of its stubborn will. You must ensure it grazes well, but also keep it from straying into forbidden fields or falling prey to the unseen dangers that lurk just beyond the village's protective gaze. Wild dogs, foxes, or even desperate wanderers could pose a threat dot as you shepherd the goat. Your eyes scan the ground for useful items. A fallen branch, sturdy enough for firewood. Perhaps a few scattered acorns, a meager supplement to the family's diet if roasted. Every resource is valuable, every opportunity to gather crucial. There is no waste here, no surplus. Life is a constant calculation of what can be used, what can be saved, what can prolong existence for another day. Your mind, though young, is already home to this scarcity, constantly assessing, constantly searching. The other children of the village are engaged in similar tasks. You see a boy, a year or two older, struggling to pull a small handcart laden with straw for bedding. Girls your age are often at the communal well, the heavy wooden buckets a stark testament to their burgeoning strength, their backs already bowed with effort. There is no formal school building, no dedicated teacher. Learning is an apprenticeship to life itself. You learn the names of the plants, which are edible and which are poisonous. You learn the signs of the weather, reading the sky for the promise of rain or the threat of a coming storm. You learn to interpret the moods of the animals, their subtle indications of health or illness. This knowledge, passed down through generations, is your true education, vital for your very existence. Moments of play, though rare, are cherished. These are not structured games with rules and equipment, but spontaneous bursts of energy, fleeting, interludes snatched between chores. Perhaps you and a few other children find yourselves momentarily free near the village stream. A flat stone becomes a skipping toy, sent skittering across the water surface. A gnarled stick transforms into an imaginary sword, wielded in mock battles against unseen foes, or a shepherd's crook guiding a flock of imaginary sheep. Laughter, clear and bright, pierces the air for a brief moment, a stark contrast to the usual somber tones of adult life. But these moments are short-lived. A parent's call, the insistent bleating of an untended animal, or the growing rumbling in your stomach quickly pulls you back to the reality of your duties. The sun continues its slow climb, reaching its zenith. This is the hour of the midday meal, if your family is fortunate enough to have one. You return to the hut, the goat tethered outside, its work for the morning done. The meal is simple, a repeat of the morning's gruel, perhaps supplemented by a small piece of dark, hard bread, saved from a previous day. Eaten in silence, it is a refueling, not a pleasure. The silence is not one of discomfort, but of shared understanding of the effort required to produce this meager sustenance, and the effort still required to continue the day. After the midday meal, the afternoon brings its own set of responsibilities. If it's a weaving day, you might be tasked with helping your mother with the wool. Your small fingers, nimble and quick, might untangle knots or help to guide the threads on a rudimentary loom. The rhythmic click-clack of the shuttle, the soft rasp of the wool, the steady hum of your mother's quiet song. These sounds fill the hut, a backdrop to the ceaseless creation of fabric that will become clothing, blankets, or trade goods. This is a skill passed down from mother to daughter, from generation to generation, essential for warmth and trade. If not weaving, perhaps you are sent to the forest to gather firewood. This is a task that combines necessity with a hint of danger. The forest, while providing vital resources, is also a place of wildness, of unseen creatures, of shadows that can play tricks on the mind. Your father might accompany you, or you might go with older siblings, learning to distinguish dry fallen branches from living wood, learning which trees burn best, learning to carry the surprisingly heavy bundles back to the village. The scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and pine needles fills the air, a different kind of earthy smell than that of the hut or the fields. Your breath mists in the cooler, shaded air beneath the canopy of ancient trees. As the afternoon wears on, the light begins to soften, shifting from the stark brightness of noon to a warmer, more golden hue. But this is not the golden hour of leisure. It is a signal that the day's light is waning, and there are still tasks to complete before thee. Deep shadows bring the cold and the dangers of night. You might help bring the animals back into their enclosures, ensuring they are safe for the night. You might assist with preparing vegetables from the small garden plot, or with grinding more grain for tomorrow's gruel. Every moment of daylight is precious, maximized for productivity. The concept of free time, as you understand it, a designated period for personal pursuits or relaxation, simply does not exist. Every waking hour, from the first crow of the rooster to the last flicker of the hearth fire, is dedicated to survival. Your life is a continuous cycle of chores, punctuated only by brief periods of rest and sustenance. Your body, though young, carries the marks of this relentless labor, small scars from sharp tools, calluses on your hands and feet, a perpetual tiredness that seeps into your very bones. Yet there is a strange resilience that comes with it, an unspoken strength that grows with each dawn, each task completed. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the western sky in fiery oranges and deep purples, the air quickly chills. The faint scent of wood smoke from every hut in the village mingles, creating a comforting, if still earthy, blanket over the settlement. The sounds of the village begin to settle, the last bleating of sheep, the final bray of a donkey, the closing of a door, the low murmur of voices within huts. Soon, only the crackle of hearth fires and the distant sounds of the wild will remain. You gather one last armful of kindling, your small arms struggling with the load, your breath misting in the rapidly cooling air. The thought of the warm, if smoky, hut is a strong pull. Another day of labor is almost complete. You are tired, your muscles ache, but you have contributed. You have survived. And in this world, that is the most profound victory of all. As you push open the familiar wooden door, the warmth of the hearth embracing you, you know tomorrow will bring the same rhythm, the same demands, the same quiet struggle for existence. This is the childhood you live, an apprenticeship to life itself. As the last sliver of the sun dipped below the distant tree line, dragging the final vestiges of warmth with it, the medieval village swiftly surrendered to the encroaching chill. The air, crisp and biting, carried the sharp scent of wood smoke, now thicker and more pervasive as every hearth was coaxed to life, a desperate beacon against the cold. For you, the small peasant child, the transition from day to night was not a gentle fading of light, but a rapid descent into a world dominated by shadow, biting cold, and the subtle yet constant gnawing of hunger. Your body, already weary from The day's ceaseless chores, felt the creeping stiffness in your small muscles. Your hands, roughened by tasks far beyond your years, ached with a dull, persistent throb. The mud that clung to your worn clogs from the fields felt heavier, colder. A stark reminder of the earth that was both provider and relentless taskmaster. Inside the hut, the single flickering flame of the hearth cast dancing, distorted shadows on the mud and wattle walls, creating a sense of both warmth and confinement. The evening meal, if it could truly be called a meal, was a quiet affair. There were no joyful conversations, no laughter, just the communal act of consuming what little sustenance was available. Your mother, her face etched with a weariness that matched your father's, carefully portioned the thin gruel into chipped, wooden bowls. Perhaps on a lucky day, there was a small piece of stale, dark bread, its crust hard and chewy, a texture that offered resistance to your hungry teeth. You ate slowly, savoring each mouthful, allowing the meager warmth of the gruel to spread through your chilled body, knowing that this was likely all you would consume until the following dawn. The hollow ache in your stomach, momentarily quieted, would soon return, a familiar companion throughout the long, dark hours of sleep. The silence that accompanied these meals was not empty, but heavy with unspoken thoughts. The adults, your parents, carried the immense weight of providing for the family, their minds perpetually calculating the stores of grain, the health of the single cow, the promise of the next harvest. You, as a child, absorbed this unspoken anxiety. You saw it in the lines around your father's eyes as he stared into the dying embers, in the way your mother's shoulders slumped as she cleared the few bowls. There was no need for words. The struggle for survival was a language understood by all. As the last remnants of the meal were cleared, your mother would begin the nightly preparations. Perhaps a small patch on a worn tunic needed mending, her fingers nimble with needle and thread, illuminated by the scant light from the fire. Or she might begin the slow process of spinning wool, the rhythmic whir of the spindle, a hypnotic sound that filled the small space. You would watch, perhaps helping with small tasks like holding the distaff, your own young hands learning the movements that would one day sustain you. These were the lessons of the evening, not from books or scrolls, but from the quiet, tireless diligence of those who had learned to wring existence from a harsh world. There were no bedtime stories here, no elaborate rituals to usher in sleep. As the fire dwindled to a glow, casting long, wavering shadows, your family would gather on their pallets, huddled close for warmth. The body heat of your siblings, small and comforting, was a welcome reprieve from the penetrating cold. Your father might offer a brief prayer, a murmured plea for protection through the night, for a bountiful harvest, for strength to endure. The words, ancient and unchanging, were a familiar drone that lulled you towards sleep. Sleep, however, was rarely. A deep, unbroken void. The hut offered little protection from the sounds of the medieval night. You would hear the scuttling of unseen mice in the straw, the restless shuffling of the goat just outside the thin walls, perhaps the distant howl of a wolf or the eerie hoot of an owl. The wind, finding its way through cracks in the wattle, would whistle a mournful tune, reminding you of the vast, cold wilderness that lay just beyond your fragile shelter. Even in sleep, your senses were on edge, attuned to the subtle shifts in the environment, a primal instinct honed by generations of vulnerability. Sometimes in the darkest hours before dawn, the gnawing hunger would become more acute, a sharp ache in your empty stomach that would pull you from a fitful slumber. You would lie awake, staring up at the smoke-stained ceiling, listening to the even breaths of your sleeping family, longing for the first crow of the rooster that signaled the beginning of a new day and the promise of another meager portion of gruel. These were the moments when the weight of your existence, the fragility of life in this age, pressed down upon you most heavily. There was no escaping the cold, the hunger, the constant threat of illness or crop failure. Survival was a daily, hourly battle fought not with swords, but with endurance. Yet, even in this harsh reality, there were fleeting moments of unexpected comfort, small pockets of warmth in a cold world. The quiet presence of your family, their familiar breathing in the darkness, was a reassurance. The warmth radiating from the hearth, even as it died, clung to the air, a physical comfort against the chill. The rough fabric of your tunic, though coarse, was a barrier against the elements. These were not luxuries, but simply the raw, unadorned necessities of life, valued more deeply for their scarcity. You might drift into a dream, a child's mind finding escape in fantasy. Perhaps a dream of a world where food was abundant, where the sun always shone, where colorful clothes existed, and laughter was free and plentiful. A dream of soft beds and endless play. These dreams, though quickly forgotten upon awakening, were fleeting glimpses of an imagined world, a stark contrast to the daily grind. They were the mind's way of coping, of finding a release from the relentless demands of reality. As the night deepened, the silence within the hut often became profound, broken only by the crackle of the last embers. The heavy scent of smoke and damp earth filled your nostrils, a lullaby of the peasant's life. Your body, though small, felt every bump and imperfection of the straw pallet beneath you. You instinctively curled tighter, seeking warmth, drawing your thin limbs closer to your core. The simplicity of your existence, stripped bare of all modern complexities, meant that survival was the only true pursuit, and every discomfort, every ache, was simply a part of that pursuit. The air grew colder as the night wore on, just before the first hints of dawn. It was the deepest, most biting cold, the kind that seeped into your bones and made you shiver even in your fitful sleep. You would pull your threadbare wool blanket tighter, if you were lucky enough to have one, or press closer to a sibling, sharing precious body heat. This was a world without central heating, without insulated walls, where the cold was a constant, formidable enemy that sought to steal your warmth, your energy, and ultimately, your life. The vulnerability was absolute. You would finally succumb to the deep exhaustion, drifting into a restless sleep, punctuated by shivers and the faint, ghostly echoes of the night outside. Your small body, hardened by endless labor, would seek its brief reprieve, gathering strength for the relentless demands of the coming day. You were a child of the Middle Ages, not by choice, but by birth, already a seasoned veteran in a quiet, unyielding battle for existence. And as you slept, the world outside remained cold, dark, and indifferent, waiting for the rooster's next insistent call. The new day arrives not with the gentle whispers of a distant future, but with the familiar, urgent call of the rooster, a sound that pulls you from the restless depths of sleep, your small body still heavy with the lingering ache of yesterdays. Labor begins its slow awakening on the straw pallet. The air in the hut remains thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, a constant reminder of the world you inhabit. Today, however, feels subtly different. A sharper breeze whistles through the gaps in the wattle walls, carrying the crisp scent of decay from the autumn leaves outside. The days are noticeably shorter, the sun's climb less assertive, signaling the relentless approach of winter. After the usual meager morning gruel, consumed in quiet haste, your tasks shift from the immediate confines of the hut to the vast, open embrace of the fields. This is where the true battle for survival is waged, where the strength of your family, and indeed the entire village, is tested against the caprices of the land and the changing seasons. Today, perhaps, is a day for gleaning, a task you've come to know intimately. You join your mother, and perhaps an older sibling, making your way across the stubbled fields where the harvest has already passed. The earth under your worn clogs is hard and uneven, dotted with the sharp remnants of stalks. Your eyes, accustomed to scanning the ground for any useful item, now meticulously search for discarded ears of grain, kernels missed by the reapers. Each tiny find is a small victory, a precious addition to the family's meager stores. Your fingers, nimble and quick, pluck the forgotten bounty from the dirt, dropping them into the rough sack slung over your shoulder. The cold wind whips at your coarse tunic, a constant chill against your skin. But you ignore it, your focus absolute dot as you work. You become acutely aware of the rhythmic sounds of the village laboring alongside you. The distant thud of an axe. From the forest, the lowing of cattle, the occasional shouted command from a farmer, the soft, murmuring conversations of women as they work. You are part of a larger, collective effort, a communal struggle against scarcity. Though silent in your own focus, you feel the unspoken connection to the of figures bent over the land, all performing the same ancient, unchanging rituals of survival. Sometimes, a brief moment of interaction breaks the monotony. Another child, perhaps a year or two older, gleaning nearby, might offer a rare shared smile, a fleeting connection forged in shared hardship. Perhaps a quick whispered conversation about a particularly good patch of missed grain, or a shared observation of a hawk circling overhead. These small, unadorned moments of human connection are precious, fleeting sparks of warmth in a world that offers little in the way of overt affection or leisure. The sun continues its slow arc across the sky, its light growing weaker as the day progresses. The air, despite the effort of your labor, remains stubbornly cold, seeping into your bones. Your stomach, having quieted after the morning gruel, begins its familiar rumble, a constant reminder of the hunger that defines much of your existence. There are no scheduled breaks, no designated mealtimes, beyond the quick, opportunistic consumption of food when it is available. Work continues as long as there is light, as long as there is a task to be done. The physical demands are relentless. Your back aches from bending. Your fingers are stiff from the cold and the constant searching. A sharp piece of stubble might prick your skin, drawing a tiny drop of blood, a common occurrence that you barely register. These are the small, everyday injuries of a life lived in constant contact with the harsh land, ignored as minor inconveniences. In the face of greater needs, your body, though young, is already hardening, adapting to the constant strain, building a resilience born of necessity. As the afternoon wears on, the light begins to fade more rapidly. The sky takes on a bruised, wintry hue, and the wind picks up, carrying the promise of colder days to come. Your mother calls you, her voice carried on the wind, signaling the end of the day's gleaning. You gather your sack, surprisingly heavy with the scattered grains, a testament to your diligent efforts. Each kernel represents another mouthful, another moment of sustenance for your family. The walk back to the village feels longer, your legs heavy, your body craving the meager warmth of the hut. As you approach the cluster of thatched roofs, the scent of wood smoke is stronger, more inviting. You might see men returning from the forest, their backs bowed under heavy loads of firewood, or women leading the last of the livestock back to their pens. The sounds of the village shift, becoming more domestic, the lowing of animals being settled for the night, the distant murmur of voices from within huts, the occasional cough or cry once inside the hut, the warmth from the still glowing hearth, is a profound comfort. You empty your sack of gleaned grain onto a pile, a small but vital contribution to the family's stores. Your father might grunt in acknowledgement, or your mother might offer a brief, tired smile, their own forms weary from their respective labors. These unspoken gestures are the highest praise, the recognition of your essential role in the family's survival. The evening brings its routine, a repeat of the simple gruel, eaten in the deepening shadows, illuminated only by the hearth's glow. Perhaps a small, cracked bowl of dried berries, saved from summer, a rare and precious treat that briefly brightens the blandness of the meal. These are moments of profound appreciation, where the simplest pleasure becomes an extraordinary luxury. As the fire slowly dies, its embers casting long, wavering shadows, you huddle with your family on your straw pallet. The collective warmth is crucial against the biting cold that seeps through the thin walls. You listen to the sounds of the medieval night, the wind whistling through the cracks, the distant howl of a wolf, the rustle of straw as mice scurry. Your mind, though tired, is acutely aware of the thin line that separates your small, fragile world from the vast, indifferent wilderness outside. You think of the coming winter, a season of immense hardship, of scarce food and bitter cold. You have heard the adults speak of it in hushed tones, of families that did not survive the deepest months. The fear is a cold knot in your stomach, but it is a familiar fear, one that has been passed down through generations. Your childhood. Here is a constant apprenticeship to survival, a daily lesson in resilience. Each ache, each shiver, each tiny gleaned kernel is a part of this harsh, unyielding education. As sleep finally claims you, pulling you into its restless depths, you carry the unspoken knowledge that tomorrow will bring the same relentless rhythm, the same demands, the same quiet battle for existence. And in this world, that is simply the way of life, a constant test of endurance. The brief, lingering warmth of autumn had finally surrendered to the unyielding grip of winter. The world outside your small hut, once painted in shades of dull green and brown, now lay draped in a blanket of pristine, unforgiving white. The wind, no longer merely biting, howled with the ferocity of a wild beast, rattling the wattle walls and whistling through every crack and crevice, a constant, mournful dirge. For you, the child of this harsh land, winter was not a season of gentle snowfalls and festive warmth, but a brutal, relentless adversary that tested the very limits of endurance. Every breath you took outside misted instantly, a fleeting cloud of your own fragile existence in the biting air. The ground was hard, iron-bound with frost beneath the snow, making every step a crunching effort. The silence of the snow-laden landscape outside was only broken by the raw, untamed voice of the wind and the occasional, desperate cry of a bird struggling to find shelter. The days grew agonizingly short, and the sun, when it bothered to appear, hung low in the sky like a pale, indifferent eye, offering little in the way of comfort or warmth. Most of your time was now spent indoors, huddled close to the smoldering hearth, its flickering light a precious commodity. The air inside the hut, though smoky and thick, was a haven from the piercing cold outside. You learned to appreciate every ember, every twig that could be coaxed into flame, for fire meant survival. Your small fingers, often stiff with cold, even indoors, would instinctively reach towards the embers, seeking that precious, radiating warmth, even as the smoke stung your eyes. The warmth never seemed quite enough, but it was all there was. Chores shifted from the vast, open fields to the cramped, confined space of your home. Your small hands, red and chapped from the cold, were now occupied with tasks that required patience and precision in the dim light. Perhaps you were tasked with helping your mother prepare flax for spinning, separating the tough fibers, feeling the rough texture against your sensitive skin. The repetitive motion of the spindle, the soft rasp of the wool, became a hypnotic rhythm, a way to pass the long, dark hours. Or you might sit beside your father, watching him mend a broken tool or sharpen a rusty blade, your eyes absorbing every precise movement, learning the silent language of craftsmanship essential for survival. He might teach you to whittle, carving, a simple wooden spoon or a small, crude animal figure, the smooth wood offering a brief moment of tactile satisfaction in a world of rough edges. Already scarce, became even more precious. The meager stores of dried grain, smoked meat, if your family was lucky enough to have any, and preserved vegetables dwindled with each passing day. The morning gruel seemed thinner, the portion smaller. The hollow ache in your stomach became a constant companion, a dull, persistent throb that defined much of your waking hours. You learned to ignore it, to push it to the back of your mind, but it was always there, a silent reminder of the omnipresent threat of starvation. The very thought of food, even the bland gruel, could consume your thoughts, a tantalizing, elusive dream. You learned to distinguish between true hunger and the phantom pains it could cause. A grim education in self-control and endurance. Water, too, presented a challenge. The communal well might freeze over, requiring your father or an older sibling to break through the thick ice with a heavy pick. Or snow, though plentiful, had to be melted over the fire. A slow and inefficient process that consumed precious fuel. Every drop was valued, every resource carefully managed. Waste was not an option. It was a luxury you could not afford. The taste of melted snow, slightly metallic and always cold, was your primary source of hydration, a stark contrast to the abundant, clean water of a world yet to come. Social interactions in the village dwindled. The pathways between huts, once busy with the daily movements of villagers, were now often covered in deep snow, making travel arduous. The biting wind discouraged casual visits. Families retreated into the confines of their homes, forming small, self-sufficient islands in a sea of white. The only sounds outside were the shriek of the wind, the crunch of footsteps on hardened snow, or the muffled cries of children, quickly silenced. The silence within the village became heavier, a collective holding of breath against the winters. Tyranny. You could feel the tension, the worry, even in the quiet of your own home, a palpable presence that permeated the very air. Moments of childhood play became even rarer, confined to the limited space within the hut. Perhaps you would carve simple figures from a piece of discarded wood with a dull knife, the shavings collecting on the dirt floor. Or you might tell whispered stories to your younger siblings, tales of summer days, of abundant harvests, or of imaginary worlds where food was plentiful and the sun always shone. These were small acts of defiance against the harsh reality, moments where the child's mind sought refuge in imagination, creating fleeting oases of joy amidst the monotony. Your laughter, when it came, was soft, quickly stifled, a precious, fragile sound. The nights were endless, a profound darkness amplified by the silence of the snow-covered world. You would lie awake on your pallet, bundled tightly with your siblings, listening to the incessant howl of the wind, imagining the cold outside, a monstrous entity trying to breach the fragile walls of your hut. The cold seeped through the cracks, chilling your very bones, making you shiver uncontrollably even in your sleep. Dreams, when they came, were often filled with warmth, with food, with sunlight, only to be brutally dispelled by the sharp bite of the morning chill, leaving you with a lingering sense of loss. Illness was an ever-present fear during winter. A cough, a fever, a chill, any of these could swiftly escalate, becoming a death knell in a world without medicine, without doctors. You saw it in the village, a hut that suddenly fell silent, smoke no longer rising from its chimney, a grim sign that the cold and sickness had claimed another family. This unspoken knowledge, this constant awareness of mortality, was an intrinsic part of your childhood. You learned early that life was fleeting, a precious spark that could be extinguished by a sudden chill or an empty stomach. The fear wasn't paralyzing, but a low, constant hum beneath the surface of daily life, a motivator for caution and endurance. Yet amidst this relentless struggle, there was a peculiar resilience that blossomed. The quiet strength of your family, their shared endurance, was a constant lesson. You learned to find comfort in the simplest things, the small, shared warmth of the hearth, the rough texture of your mother's hand as she brushed your hair, the soft, even breathing of your sleeping siblings beside you. These were not luxuries. but the very fabric of your existence, holding you together against the overwhelming odds. You understood, without being told, that your survival was intrinsically linked to theirs. A powerful, unspoken bond forged in the crucible of hardship. You survived each day, not with grand gestures or heroic feats, but with quiet persistence, with the completion of endless small tasks, with the enduring hope for the sun's return, for the melting of the snows, for the promise of a new spring and a renewed harvest. Winter was a time of holding on, of conserving strength, of simply existing. As the deep cold embraced the hut, pulling you into a fitful, dream-haunted sleep, you knew that every passing night was a victory, every waking morning a testament to your quiet, unyielding will to survive. The world outside was a frozen, indifferent beast, but within the walls of your humble home, the faint flicker of life stubbornly persisted, a small beacon against the vast, unforgiving darkness. The heart of winter clenched the world in an iron grip. Each morning brought a sky the color of bruised pewter, an air so sharp it stung the inside of your nose. The deep, heavy snow that had settled over the village seemed to absorb all sound, creating a profound, oppressive silence, broken only by the relentless shriek of the wind. Inside your small hut, the world was a constant battle against the cold and the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. Your hands, perpetually chapped and stiff, moved with unpracticed efficiency born of necessity, preparing flax or mending worn garments by the meager light of the sputtering hearth dot. The very rhythm of your life had slowed, mirroring the frozen landscape outside. Outdoor chores were minimal, limited to quick dashes to the woodpile or breaking ice from the communal well. The villagers moved like ghosts, their figures hunched against the wind, their faces grim, their greetings brief and functional. There was no leisure, no energy for idle chatter. Every action was measured, every movement economical, focused solely on the enduring task of survival. The cold seeped into your very bones, a constant, dull ache that sleep offered little respite. From your dreams, if they came, were often fleeting visions of warmth, of a sun-drenched field, or the unattainable luxury of a full belly. Yet, even in the bleakest depths of winter, life, stubbornly, found ways to persist. In the longest, darkest evenings, when the wind howled its loudest outside, your family would huddle closer to the hearth, sharing the faint warmth. Perhaps your father, his voice a low rumble, would recount old tales of past winters, of ancestors who endured even greater hardships, or stories of fantastical beasts and ancient heroes. These were not mere entertainments. They were lessons in resilience, reminders that generation after generation had faced the same cold, the same hunger, and had emerged on the other side. You would listen, your small eyes wide, absorbing the rhythms of the spoken word, the images they conjured, finding a momentary escape from the four walls of the hut. Sometimes a neighbor, equally desperate for human contact, might brave the snow-laden paths for a brief visit. Their presence, a new face in the familiar confines of your home, was a small event in itself. News, always sparse, would be exchanged in hushed tones. News of a distant lord, a rumor of conflict, or more. Often, a grim update on another family battling the winter cough. The fear of illness, already a shadow in your mind, would sharpen with these reports. You learned to suppress your own coughs, to hide the shivers, to conserve every ounce of energy, knowing that weakness was a luxury your body could not afford. Days continued to crawl by, marked by the thinning of your family's stored food. The gruel became thinner still, its taste almost entirely water. The gnawing hunger, though you tried to ignore it, was a constant, insistent companion. You would find yourself instinctively chewing on a piece of straw, or pressing your stomach, a vain attempt to quell the empty ache. Your body, though small, was a testament to endurance, drawing on every last reserve, slowly adapting to a state of perpetual scarcity. You became acutely aware of every discomfort, every slight pain, every murmur of your stomach, a living instrument finely tuned to the rhythms of deprivation. Then, almost imperceptibly, a change began to stir. It started not with warmth, but with light. The sun, though still low, began to hold its place in the sky for a fraction longer each day. The quality of the light itself seemed to shift from the harsh, cold brilliance of midwinter to a softer, more hopeful pale gold. You noticed it first in the early mornings, as the dawn seemed less reluctant to break through the darkness. An subtle, almost imperceptible promise of what was to come. Then came the drip, the first soft, rhythmic drip of melting snow from the eaves of the hut. A small, insignificant sound that, to your ears, was like the sweetest music. It signaled the slow, grudging retreat of the frost's iron grip. Soon, small patches of dark, wet earth would begin to appear, staining the pristine white, a canvas revealing the hidden life beneath. The scent of damp earth, rich and fertile, would rise from these patches, replacing the sharp, sterile smell of pure snow. A few days later, you might hear it, the first hesitant chirping of a tiny bird, a lone, brave sound piercing the vast silence. It was not the exuberant chorus of spring, but a tentative, almost fragile note, a whisper of life returning. These small signs, barely noticeable to an untrained eye or ear, were momentous events in your world, profound assurances that winter, though fierce, was not eternal. They ignited a tiny spark of hope deep within you, a warmth that had nothing to do with the hearth fire dot. As the days visibly lengthened, your father would begin to stir with renewed purpose, despite the lingering cold. Tools would be brought out, examined, sharpened. Discussions would begin about the fields, about which seeds were left, about the condition of the soil. The unspoken anxieties of winter, though not entirely gone, began to ease, replaced by the anxieties of preparation, of the demanding work that lay ahead. You would watch them, sensing the subtle shift in their demeanor, the cautious optimism that bloomed with the returning light. You, too, felt the change in the rhythm of your blood, a yearning to be outside, to feel the sun on your face, even if it was still weak. Your hands, though still raw, felt a new eagerness for the tasks that awaited in the thawing fields. The promise of spring, though still weeks away, was a potent force, a silent vow that the endless cycle of hunger and cold would soon give way to the promise of new growth, new life. The resilience that had carried you through the long winter would now shift its focus, preparing you for the different, yet equally demanding, labors of spring. And as the last vestiges of winter's grip softened, you understood, with the quiet wisdom of a child of this age, that survival was not merely enduring hardship, but perpetually preparing for the next season's challenge, forever bound to the earth's ancient rhythm. The long, grueling embrace of winter finally began to loosen its grip. It was a gradual, almost reluctant retreat, marked not by a sudden warmth, but by subtle shifts in the air, the light, and the very sounds of the world. The incessant howl of the wind slowly gave way to a softer sigh. The deep, packed snow, which had blanketed the village for months, began to soften, then to melt, first in trickles, then in steady rivulets that carved new paths through the thawing earth. The scent of damp, rich soil, liberated from the frost's iron clasp, rose into the air, a profound and ancient fragrance of renewal. For you, the child of the land, this transition from winter's desolation to spring's tentative awakening was a palpable change, a stirring within your own weary body. The perpetual ache in your bones seemed to lessen, replaced by a cautious energy. The light, now lingering longer each day, seemed to hold more promise, banishing the deep shadows that had clung to the hut for so many months. Your eyes, accustomed to the muted tones of winter, greedily absorbed the first hints of green, tiny, tenacious shoots pushing through the thawing mud, a vibrant splash of life against the lingering brown. The sounds of the village also changed. The mournful silence of winter was slowly replaced by a growing chorus of life. The bleating of newborn lambs, thin and reedy at first, then stronger. The excited clucking of hens, the distant bray of a donkey, and then the true heralds of spring, the joyous, insistent chirping of birds, their tiny voices filling the air with a symphony of renewed life. These were not mere sounds. They were affirmations, proof that the cycle had turned, that endurance had once again been rewarded. With the thaw came the monumental labor of spring. This was not a time for rest, but for intense, immediate action. The fields, once frozen solid, now needed to be prepared for planting. Your father, his back already aching from winter's inactivity, would spend long hours turning the heavy soil with a rudimentary plow pulled by the family's scrawny ox, or with his own raw strength. You, as a child, were an indispensable part of this effort. Your tasks might include gathering stones from the newly exposed fields, clearing away winter debris, or simply following behind your father, breaking up the larger clumps of earth with a small hoe, or even your bare hands, ensuring the soil was fine enough for the precious seeds. The work was relentless, from dawn until dusk. Your hands, though calloused, would ache and sometimes bleed from the rough soil and the sharp stones. Your legs, perpetually coated in mud, grew strong and agile from hours of walking and bending. The sun, though still cool, would begin to burn. Your exposed skin. Thirst became a constant companion, quenched only by the occasional sip of cold, fresh water from a nearby stream, its taste purer, more invigorating than the melted snow of winter. Every muscle in your body protested, but your spirit, fueled by the promise of the coming harvest, pushed onwards. The village itself hummed with activity. Men and women, young and old, toiled together in the communal fields, or on their family plots. The air was filled with the grunts of effort, the rhythmic scrape of hoes, the low murmur of tired conversations. There was a sense of urgency, an unspoken understanding that the future of the entire community depended on the success of these crucial spring weeks. You saw other children, your peers, performing similar tasks, their faces smudged with dirt, their small bodies moving with the same determined weariness. You were all part of this ancient, unwavering ritual, bound by the common thread of survival. Amidst the endless toil, there were fleeting moments of simple joy, brief sparks of childhood in a world dominated by labor. Perhaps as you cleared a particularly stubborn patch of weeds, you would uncover a cluster of early wildflowers, their vibrant colors a startling contrast to the browns and greens of the field. You might pause for a moment, marveling at their fragility and beauty, before carefully placing them aside, a small offering for your mother. Or, during a rare, short break, you might steal a moment to chase a buzzing bee, or watch a ladybug crawl across your calloused finger. These small wonders a quiet reminder of the world's simple magic. The evenings, though longer, offered little respite. After a day in the fields, your body was heavy with exhaustion. The evening meal, perhaps a slightly larger portion of gruel, or if lucky, some fresh wild greens foraged from the thawing forest, was consumed in quiet weariness. Your parents, though equally tired, would discuss the progress in the fields, the signs of the weather, the precious few seeds that remained. Their words were filled with a cautious optimism, a hope tempered by the countless hardships of past seasons. As the hearth fire dwindled to embers, and you huddled on your pallet. With your siblings, the sounds of the spring night would fill your senses. The distant croaking of frogs from a nearby pond, the gentle rustle of new leaves on the trees, the soft hoot of an owl. These were the sounds of a living, breathing world, a stark contrast to the deathly silence of winter. Your sleep, though, still restless from the aches in your body, often brought dreams of green fields, of abundant crops, of the simple joy of warmth and light. You were growing not just in stature, but in resilience, in knowledge. Each season was a new teacher, imparting vital lessons in the harsh curriculum of medieval life. Winter had taught you endurance and the deep appreciation of small comforts. Spring was teaching you the relentless necessity of labor, the intricate connection between effort and survival, and the profound hope that blossomed with every tiny seed planted in the earth. You understood, with the quiet wisdom of a child shaped by the land, that your life was inextricably linked to the earth's ancient rhythm, a ceaseless cycle of sowing and reaping, enduring and hoping. And as the nights grew shorter and the days stretched longer, filled with the promise of summer's bounty, you knew that your childhood was not merely a time of play, but a constant, vital apprenticeship to the very art of living. The delicate promise of spring had bloomed into the full, robust embrace of summer. The sun, once a pale, reluctant visitor, now blazed with fierce intensity, drying the mud at the fields and ripening the precious crops. The days stretched long and golden, filled with the buzzing of insects, the songs of birds, and the ceaseless, rhythmic hum of growth. For you, the child, now a little older, perhaps on the cusp of adolescence, the season brought a new wave of intense labor, but also a profound, tangible sense of hope. This was the period of the harvest, the culmination of an entire year's tireless effort, the time when survival itself hung in the balance. The fields, once green with young shoots, now shimmered with the golden sway of ripe grain. The wheat, the barley, the oats, each stalk represented a mouthful, a day of sustenance, a shield against the gnawing hunger that had defined the long winter. The air was thick with the scent of dry earth, ripening crops, and the faint, sweet smell of the wild flowers that clung stubbornly to the edges of the fields. The sun beat down relentlessly, warming your skin, a sensation you had yearned for during the long months of cold. The harvest was a truly communal effort, demanding every able body in the village. You joined your parents in the fields from dawn. Until dusk, your small body now stronger, more accustomed to the relentless demands. You no longer merely gleaned. You assisted with the reaping itself, your hands learning the precise, swift motion of the sickle, carefully cutting the golden stalks, bundling them into sheaves. The sharp blades, though dangerous, felt like extensions of your own will, instruments of your survival. Your back ached from constant bending. Your fingers developed new calluses, and your face became tanned and weathered by the sun and wind. Sweat would trickle down your forehead, stinging your eyes, but you ignored it, your focus absolute on the precious bounty before you. The sounds of the harvest were a symphony of human effort, the rhythmic swish of countless sickles, the low murmurs of conversation, the occasional shouted encouragement, the joyful laughter of children briefly released from direct supervision, chasing each other through the already reaped fields. Even the youngest children contributed, picking up stray heads of grain, their small hands instinctively gathering. This was a time when the entire village moved with a singular purpose, a collective will to secure their future. You felt a deep, unspoken connection to those around you, a bond forged not just by proximity, but by shared labor and shared destiny. As the sun began its descent, painting the western sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, the last bundles of grain would be gathered and loaded onto crude carts, pulled by tired oxen or by the sheer muscle of men. The air, cooler now, carried the faint, sweet scent of newly cut grain, a perfume of success and relief. The walk back to the village was slower, your body heavy with exhaustion, but your heart, too, felt heavy with the quiet satisfaction of a day's work well done. The granaries, once barren, slowly began to fill, their growing abundance a testament to the village's collective endurance. With the harvest safely gathered, a rare and precious celebration would often ensue. This was not a lavish feast as you might imagine, but a communal gathering of joyous relief. Perhaps a small pig, carefully fattened throughout the year, would be slaughtered, its meat roasted over a large bonfire. The scent of cooking meat, a rare luxury, filled the air, intoxicating and mouth-watering. Villagers would gather, their faces tired but etched with smiles, sharing simple songs, telling stories of the harvest, or recounting humorous anecdotes from the year. The ale, brewed from last year's grain, flowed sparingly, but enough to bring a light-headed warmth and a brief loosening of tongues. You, as a child, would be allowed to stay up later, basking in the glow of the bonfire, listening to the adults. Voices, their laughter a sound of unburdened joy rarely heard. You might receive a small piece of roasted meat, a taste so rich and savory it seemed almost fantastical, a stark contrast to the bland gruel that comprised your daily diet. You might even join in a simple shuffling dance, your bare feet on, the cool earth, your small body moving awkwardly, but with a sense of pure, unadulterated happiness. These were fleeting moments, brief glimpses of a childhood that, despite its hardships, held its own unique form of celebration. They were a temporary reward, a collective sigh of relief before the inevitable return to the grind. Not yet. Even amidst the temporary abundance, the underlying reality of medieval life never truly disappeared. The harvest, though bountiful, had to be carefully managed. A bad winter could deplete it quickly. Illness could strike at any time. The Lord's taxes still loomed. Your childhood had been an unyielding apprenticeship to this reality, teaching you a resilience that modern life rarely demands. You had learned not just to survive, but to anticipate, to conserve, to endure. The games you played were not for idle amusement, but for developing the strength and agility needed for labor. The stories you heard were not mere entertainment, but lessons in history, morality, and survival. As the celebration waned and the villagers dispersed, their voices growing quiet, you would return to your hut, your body still humming with the unusual warmth of the fire and the richness of the food. Sleep would come more easily tonight, a deeper, more peaceful slumber, perhaps filled with dreams of golden fields and the satisfying weight of a full stomach. You were no longer the small, bewildered child who had awakened to the cold, smoky dawn of scene one. You had grown, hardened, transformed. Your hands, once soft, were now tough and capable. Your mind, once prone to simple curiosities, now understood the intricate, brutal dance between man, land, and season. You had witnessed the cycle of life and death, of scarcity and temporary abundance. You had learned to find joy in the smallest comforts and to face fear with quiet determination. So, the question lingers, could you truly survive childhood in the Middle Ages? As you drift into a deep, well-earned sleep, the answer is not a simple yes or no. You have survived. But it was a survival shaped by unrelenting labor, by constant hunger and cold, by a deep understanding of fragility, and by an unbreakable connection to the earth and your community. It was a childhood devoid of modern luxuries, but rich in raw experience, in the quiet strength born of perseverance. The world outside your hut will continue its ancient rhythm. The warmth of summer will eventually fade, the leaves will turn, and winter will come again. But for tonight, the harvest is in, the belly is full, and the warmth of the hearth still faintly glows. This is the peace that medieval childhood offered, hard-won and fleeting, a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity. As you awaken from this journey through time, take a moment to reflect on the world you've just experienced. Did you feel the cold mud beneath your feet, the ache in your back from the endless toil? Did the taste of meager gruel or the scent of wood smoke linger? What surprised you most about this medieval childhood? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this immersive journey helped you relax or sparked your imagination, please consider liking this video. Your support helps us create more experiences like this. And if you wish to embark on more such journeys into history, mystery, or the depths of human experience, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening. May your own night be filled with warmth and peaceful dreams.